Welcome to the Pier-Glass Poetry Panels. I'm Stan Galloway, your host, and today's panel explores presentation of poetry. We'll be hearing from poets from around the world. If you are joining us live, we ask you not to use the chat function, but instead send your questions and comments through the Q&A box at our website, pierglasspoetry.wixsite.com/mysite. We'll take a look at those a little later in the show. But now, to get us started, let's meet our first poet. Anum Sattar is a graduate from College of Worcester in Worcester, Ohio. She has been published in Xavier Review, Florida Review, North Dakota Quarterly, Notre Dame Review, American Journal of Poetry, and many other online and print publications. She's an editor for the January 2021 themed issue Survival in Golden Walkman magazine. Welcome, Anum.
Hi everybody. I'm so glad to be here. And I guess I have two poems that I could read for you guys today. I guess I could start. The first one is a hyphen, and it's called Feeling Foreign, and it goes like this. Feeling foreign. I'm waiting for an air train to gates 129. Only one pair of platform screen doors open at a time. The train arrives at a set opposite to the one I'm standing at. Some local flyers are already shuffling in the right direction. No one bothers to inform me. I miss my flight. Usual hustle bustle, airport shoe shine boy kneels in the background. So that's the first poem. And the next one is also a hyphen. It's called It's Spinning, and it goes like this. It's spinning. We scarf down Arby's over his cluttered sink. He looks especially handsome in the Ralph Lauren sweater gifted to him by a former partner. I lick cheese sauce from the corner of his mouth. Eugenia wants him badly, now that he rejects her. She moved to Utah while we reside in Texas. Roderick shall wear what I customized for him when the sky clears. Until then, my pair of gold-framed Ray-Ban sunglasses stays folded in its red leather case. Undecided, he flies to Salt Lake City to catch up with an ex. So yeah, these are my two poems. Thank you for listening.
Could you tell us a little bit about how you prepare for a poem and its presentation?
Well, it depends on how I'm feeling at the moment, and the way I dress up kind of reflects how I feel, and the poems are also a reflection of how I feel, but my outfits will not coordinate with the poems all the time. Today I'm kind of like dressed up like a candy floss with like little cellophane paper pieces on my lips to look like toffee, and I'm just like, super happy, very pumped, very excited because I'm doing this, so that's kind of like how I prepare. It's based on my mood, it's very random.
Okay, thank you. Let's go ahead and then look at our next poet, Cynthia Good. An award-winning author, journalist, and TV news anchor. She has written 6 books, including Vaccinating Your Child, which won the Georgia Author of the Year Award. She has launched 2 magazines, Atlanta Woman and the nationally distributed Pink magazine for women in business. Since completing her MFA in poetry at NYU in 2019, Cynthia's poems have appeared or are forthcoming in journals including Main Street Rag, Maudlin House Review, Pink Panther Magazine, South Shore Review, The Raven's Perch, Reed Magazine, Tallgrass, Willow-Wept Review, among others. Her new chapbook from Finishing Line Press will be published later this year. Welcome, Cynthia.
Thank you, Stan, so much. It's really fantastic to be with everybody today. I'm coming to you from Mexico, from La Paz, Mexico, and happy to be in the company of Anum and Taku as well. So thank you so much for including me. The first poem I wanted to share, I wrote shortly after my mother passed away a few years ago, And I had just received what I felt was really the last tangible piece of her, because she was an artist, and her work, huge paintings, arrived in the mail to me. And it was a very emotional evening. So I wrote this poem. It's called My Mother's Nudes, because she painted nudes. It's too late to protect them. Strips of turquoise peeling from torsos. She stacked them together, paint on paint, now preserved, sorted, and cataloged. Her erotic series, bodies intertwined in tangles of breasts, limbs, and shadow. My brothers and I sent them to family and storage. Some arrived at my door. They leaned against the brick, half dressed in heaps of bubbles, crepe paper, and humidity. Broken AC in just a bra, I pose her nudes around my place, surrounding myself with her dancing across my walls, painting my room in acrylic cologne, reminding me of Picasso, who said, "There is a vial of my blood in each of these. I wrap my face in museum-grade plastic. The Dartex sucks and seals my mouth, my nose, my pores. Tomorrow I'll begin to clean up our mess." So I was really interested to learn that Elizabeth Bishop, one of my favorite poets, was terrified of reading her poems in public. Hated doing that. And there are great stories about her sharing a poem at a graduation, and the tassel kept hitting her in the face, and just really, really uncomfortable. When I started in TV news and public speaking, I was really nervous. My heart would race, my stomach would have butterflies, and somebody told me that I should think of everybody I was speaking to naked or in their underwear. Well, that didn't work, because I thought that was just weird. But something shifted when I started to think, rather than me on stage, as a poet, thinking about those you're talking to, that this is for them. It's not about me. It's not about us. It's for them. And that took all the pressure off. And when I remind myself to do it, I try to think of one person. I think of my grandmother, Alina, because I really loved her. And I think when I do that, that love and compassion, I hope, comes through to those who are watching. So that's one of my tricks. Another thing that we've been thinking about lately, because I debated this just last week with a woman I work with in my job, we're doing these Zoom seminars all the time. And this is a woman, she was a former partner of Deloitte, and she had this horrible shot, it was like one of these, and I said, "Let me help you with your shot." And she said, "I don't want any help with my shot. I'm about substance, not about, this triviality." But I think it's important to be intentional about it. I don't really think it matters what your background is, as long as we're intentional. For me, I wish I was outside so you could see the palms, here in Mexico, that are so beautiful. I try to wear something that's simple and not distracting, maybe. I know Anum is really very intentional about what she wears, and that makes such a huge impact. And anyway, so that's one thing I think. The next poem, lighting, I think is really important for me to have light, this way coming towards you. And you can even look in the camera and say, "Do I like that shot? Do I not like that shot?" If you want, you can even record yourself, listen to it, see what you like, what you don't like. Projection, how loud do you want to be, how soft, all of that. So the next poem I'm going to read to you, it's called Beautiful Things, and it could be considered prose, because this is how it looks on the page. Beautiful Things. The walls drip with necklaces made of seashells, horsetails, and leather, suspended on hooks by another woman who used to live here. Flashlights wrapped in snakeskin, crystal decanters for candles and wine, stacks of baskets for spoons, cotton, and coins, cow-shaped containers, trays on top of trays like Russian dolls, textured toothpicks, soaps called Osama and Lux Linen in Bedivere Gray, gardenia tea facial spray. I sleep in somebody else's high-poster bed, wondering how to build a home out of feather pillows, 600 thread count Egyptian cotton sheets, woven lamb's wool and hand-stained silk Indian scarves, under windows wallpapered and dogwoods, and whether the thunder outside is mine alone. So to me, that's the reason I want to share that poem is, for me, poetry is a language, and I would read it differently than I would the newspaper, right? And it reminds me of the languages like here in Mexico and Italian, dove sono la cabanette, you know, in French. It's just the way it feels in your mouth is so much fun. So for me, the presentation has a lot to do with tapping into the musicality. Also, I love to read my work to other people because I notice things about the poems I want to change, you know, instantaneously. If something's not right in the line or the stanza, to me, it pops out. So that's pretty cool. And the other thing it makes me think of is perspective. To me, poetry is real and true. I heard Ada Limon give a craft talk recently, and she said, look, I'll just be really honest, everybody. This distinction between speaker and poet, look, I'm a speaker, I'm a poet, and just there it is. Because I think whatever we write about resonates, right? Or we wouldn't be writing about it. And I think to have that connection to the words on a personal level, for me, is important. So with that, I will share the final poem that I brought to read to you. This is called, here's how it looks on the page. And I know that Stan is going to be posting these on the website too. This is called Some Drunks. I've heard there are drunks who fall asleep in their clothes on the couch in the living room, who flirt and slur and smell like gin. I've heard some say, I'm sorry in the morning, and scuffle down halls, keeping their fists in their pockets. Some eat all the powdered, sugar-dusted donuts. They want Cartier, and they sing too loud with friends. Some drunks do not shout, fuck you, at the people they love. I've heard some die or get sober and come home, placing their suitcases back on the upper shelf quietly because you were asleep. But all I know is the morning sun has turned the sky peach, and miles out across the Chattahoochee River, smoke billows from a power plant, drowning this field in lavender. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Cynthia. The emotion that roils underneath that last poem, I think, is amazing. How that it isn't the substance of the poem, but you can feel the tensions pulling, you know, different directions within the words as you speak them, and you're able to present that in a way that that feels embodied. And I say that because I think when we present poetry, as you have said, the distinction between the speaker and the author sometimes is not at all. I think that whether we are the writer, when we present a poem, we can become the speaker. And so embodying that poem, I think, is a part of the presentation of it. And that's a good segue for us to look at our next poet, who I think does exactly that. So we're going to go now to Takudzwa Chikepe, famously known as Chikepe. The poet is an international poet based in northern Zimbabwe. Chikepe defines poetry as a state of mind. He also thinks in Shona and writes in English, and vice versa. Chikepe has 15 years experience in writing poetry. He is grooming more than 200 artists in Zimbabwe and has recently started another project called Chikepe and the International Sailors Affiliates, Africa. He will be starting his Master's in Divinity at Duke University in North Carolina this fall. This year started with Chikepe being nominated as the best poet from Africa to compete for the prestigious Mutabaruka Award for Best Poet Spoken Word Entertainer by International Reggae and World Music Awards in Jamaica. We're so happy you could join us today.
Thank you so much, Dr. Stan Galloway. And hi, everyone. How are you? I'm very happy to be here. It's always amazing coming to in connection with Stan and everyone. Just a short history. I was discovered by then Bridgewater College through Twitter. Stan Galloway and Nicole. So I'm always very happy to be connected because I'm a multi-talented poet or an artist, but I've been underrated in my country, I would say. So they managed to just get the cream on the ice cream, and after that, the whole world just started to appreciate my art. So I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you, Taku. Um, do you want to say anything before we look at this first clip that you have prepared for us?
Maybe I'll just make a comment. It's true that I define poetry as a state of mind because we see the same things every day in a way, we hear the same things every day in a way, but now we can be in different states of understanding things. And sometimes it is the responsibility of a poet to prove a point or to show something that people are reluctant to see or to understand. So whenever I get into such zones of life, I am inspired to create something that is in line with poetry and to share with the world.
Excellent. Thank you for that. I'll ask Morgan to bring up the video clip that you provided for us, and we will watch you perform a poem.
Thank you so much.
Mafupa angu achamuka neui. Mafupa angu achamuka kaguyui. Mafupa angu achamuka chaminuka gui. Mafupa angu achamuka neureka ui. Mafupa angu achamuka yatasikika ui. Mafupa angu achamuka Zimbabwe The drawing board of this country was drawn by the spirit mediums, African prophets, warriors, and all the people of this land. Thou shalt not forget to fight against slavery, brutality, oppression, repression, suppression, depression, poverty, and of course the minority rule. We know this is right. This wasn't right. Concerned Bantu people, amalgamation, creating this beautiful country, Zimbabwe. From Rhodesia to Southern Rhodesia, Zimbabwe, Rhodesia to Zimbabwe. Why stop development when we have the full potential to develop ourselves? Some we left them in the bushes. Some disappeared in the unknown. Some became the known and some became the unexpected. So that you and I can have a good life, an independent life. Why are we still dependent? Why are we yearning for dependence? Africa is got problems. How far are we from solutions? Zimbabwe. The rich people we have in this country, prophets we have in this country, intellectuals we have in this country, and even poets we have in this country. What seems to be our problem? Zimbabwe. Let us go back to the drawing board. This is our country. We don't have another. We have to love her more than the way she loves us. We can do better than what was meant to be. And we can do better. than what was meant to be. King Solomon knows about this. Aliens know about this, and even man-made kingdom in Zimbabwe knows about this. We are Zimbabwe. We are the house of stone. We are the Zimbabweans. We shall not bow down to imperialism, colonization, tribalism, racism, and even corruption. Rapture, corruption, rapture. Rapture, corruption, rapture. Rapture, corruption, rapture. Rapture, corruption, rapture. We are Zimbabwe. We are the house of stone. We are the Zimbabweans. Flying high like the Zimbabwean bird. We want prosperity in this country. Flying high like the Zimbabwean bird. We have to be rich in this country. Flying high like the Zimbabwean bird. There has to be unity in this country. Flying high like the Zimbabwean bird. Africa shall stand firm and believe that together is one. Zimbabwe, we shall not be dependent, but proudly independent. Zimbabwe, we shall not be dependent, but proudly independent. Zimbabwe, we shall not be dependent, but proudly independent. Zimbabwe, we shall not be dependent, but proudly independent. In the prophecy, the bones rose. The bones are rising, and the bones will continue to rise. Neanda, Yagasikana, Way. Long live Zimbabwe! Long live! Long live Zimbabwe! Long live! Thank you.
Yeah, so the poem that I just performed is called Independent Zimbabwe. How I wrote that poem within a day. The National Broadcasting Corporation, that is the television for the country, it's called ZBC. They asked me, they phoned me and they asked me, Chikepe, can you write a poem for independence? And we want to show it on television. So it's a very tricky invitation, I would say, because that was the time when I was nominated in the Jamaican Awards. So in the country, people, they've got mixed feelings about the country, about who is right and who is wrong, about the different ways that we're doing. So for me, it was really difficult. But what guides me in such tricky incidents is how I define myself as a poet. The way that I define myself as a poet is I have to be well read. I have to be understanding everything that is around me. I have to have my opinion about everything. So that is how I came up with that poem. And that poem, it talks about when I was speaking in Shona, Mapupa angu achamuka. I was singing like in the voice of a spirit medium by the name Buyanehanda. People, they are going haywire with the spirit medium by the name Buyanehanda because she was beheaded in the colonial times. So belief in Zimbabwe is her bones, they are going to rise again. So I realize that the different political views that we have in our country, if I speak about Buyanehanda, there's no one who is going to question me if I start to speak about Buyanehanda. Everyone will be aligned to the spiritual understanding of the spirit of the country. So it was an indirect and direct way of capturing my audience. And from that's when I started now to dig deep. And the message inside was, let us go back to the drawing board. If we say we are Zimbabweans, what are we really saying about ourselves? If we are Zimbabweans, what did we want to achieve in the times of independence? Because when you look at this country, there are some people who died for this country, and there are some people who became opportunists in this country, and there are some people who are causing confusion, and there are some people who are corrupt, and there are some people who are very poor. Like for me, I come from a poor to average family. My friends, they support me from diaspora, especially from the US, because of my number of years writing poetry. They love my work. So there are some people who are poor. What are we saying about them? And in Zimbabwe also, there are some people who are very rich. They don't even want to go out of Zimbabwe because they're extremely rich. So I was questioning all those questions in a way that I don't put myself in danger to an extent that the next day I will see people with suits and they will take me to prison. But at the same time, making sure that even an intellectual, I'll leave an intellectual thinking like, I think this guy, what he's saying, there's no one who has ever said something like that. So that is how I came up with that poem.
Very good. Okay, Morgan, will you queue up the next one? And then if you have something to say, go ahead.
For me, I'm okay for now.
My joy is not with me, but my joy is with you. Far from you, I am far from joy, but being with you fills me with joy. As it is written, second time in Timothy, in his first presentation and fourth paragraph, that recalling the tears I long to see, so that I may be filled with joy. How can we be depressed if we are together? How can we be depressed if we visit each other? Without joy, tears they continue to run down our cheeks. And without joy, we are simply incomplete. As it seems, this world has been created in a way that someone is something that you don't have, and you have something that someone doesn't have. No wonder why our ancestors emphasized on the importance of barter trade. Like Paul would bring Timothy love, and Timothy would give Paul joy, and the list goes on and on and on, leaving us thinking the answer we can get from love plus joy is equal to what? Grace, prophecy, or prosperity, as we keep on guessing more and more and more. Provided we keep ourselves to ourselves, depression will eat us alive. Hatred will enslave us. And we will never change. Once we don't change, we will never change anything. More and more problems knocking on our doors, and few solutions running away through our window panes, leaving us all redundant and solutionless, busy recycling thoughts and case studies, and now so afraid of the unknown. What is it that we can think of that we do not know, except overthinking of all things we already know about? If we were really developing, by now problems would have been busy thinking of different ways and methods to resurface. And as it seems, we are busy trailing behind innovative problems. Outclassed we are, slowly trailing behind we are, as most of the times we are busy building different defensive blocks, lest problems decide to pause their journeys and check on us. Stand up and go visit that person you like. Stand up and go visit that person you don't like. Stand up, mix and exchange blessings. Stand up, mix and exchange blessings. Stand up, mix and exchange blessings. As it seems like we no longer know the beautiful meaning of a handshake, as we pour to each other different types of fake hugs. Go ye, therefore, and spread some love. Go ye, therefore, and spread some love. Go ye, therefore, and spread some love. We say no to war. We say yes to peace. Famous handshake in Singapore. The famous handshake in Singapore. The famous handshake in Singapore. Yeah.
The musicality, Chikepe, that you have put into not just the words themselves, but the expression of them really resounds. But we're here to hear you. You talk now.
Thank you so much, Dr. Stan Galloway. Yeah, in Zimbabwe, historically, poetry we didn't learn poetry from books. Poetry was a gift, I would say, from the spirits. Poets, they used to be people who used to sit next to the kings, so they would give wise counsel to the kings, and that's the history. But in the passage of time, poetry lost value. Uh, I don't know, because so many things they came into existence, including music and so many other things. Then there was a time. I always acknowledge a guy called Takudzwa Chikepe. He's one of the best poets from Zimbabwe. I think he was born 1952. Then he passed on in 1987. When I was born in 1987. So people sometimes they say I take from Takudzwa Chikepe. He was an intellectual. He went to Oxford. So he came back to Zimbabwe, and he was so super intelligent, and he was a poet. So he marketed poetry to the people, and people, they again started writing poetry in Zimbabwe. But when he passed on, it kind of went down. Then there came an era of spoken word, where people, they memorize, and they start to do spoken word, a little bit of dub poetry. But it wasn't that competitive when it comes to music. So it means when you're a poet in Zimbabwe, like me, I can't memorize yet, I would say, because I'm writing. I'm always writing. I write 5 poems, 10 poems a day. For my 15 years, I think I've written 3,600 poems. So I think my brain capacity, it works more on the writing than memorizing. If I want to memorize a small paragraph like this, it can take me a month. to memorize something like this. So I realized here, that's the reason why I like being in the US. In the US, people, they want to listen to you while you read your work. Here, when you hold a book and you want to read a poem, people, they can just get bored with you before you even say a word. Because their argument is, why haven't you memorized your poem? Why are you not performing your poem to us? Why are you reading a book to us? So for me, it disturbed me for a lot of years because I was saying to myself, I'm a very good poet, but I can't do what you do. And I also love reading my poetry. Why I also love reading my poetry? Because up to the age of 19, I couldn't read aloud. When I was growing up, in a way, I would say my parents, they're having a small problem. So in their small frustrations, when I try to read, they'll say, do silent reading. So, I would read inside myself. And to read outside, I couldn't. So I would stammer up to the age of 19 years. That is when I started to try to read or on top of my voice. So it's like I'm very new when it comes to reading. Even when I pronounce my words with care. I embrace every letter, every word, every phrase because I'm still reading. When people read for 19 years of their lives, for me, I was mute. I wasn't saying a word. So to me, I say it's my time to read. So I read in articulation. I love reading so much, and I love writing. So I say to myself, okay, fine. If I want to make people hear what I'm saying, what can I do? Then I realized also that I've got a gift of music. I compose amazing choruses, musical choruses. Then I say to myself, I combine musical choruses and poetry and add a little bit of divinity to make my own genre of poetry. So the divinity part, why so is the way to try to connect with people on a spiritual level. So that's how I came up with this poetry genre that I'm creating. And this song is part of my first album that I'm going to drop. I think it'll be a 5-track album that I'm going to drop the end of this year or late 2022 in the US. So that is the background of this of this way of doing poetry. In context, the famous handshake in Singapore, I wrote this poem in 2018. That was my first time to come to the US. And I was so happy. I was the happiest person. Once I had gone to Spain in Europe, but I had said I really want to go to the US, and the dream was fulfilled. To US, to me, if you look for my poem, it's called Boundaries. I define US as the land of poetry, as it explains now that we are speaking about poetry. Now, I don't know how it happens, but people in the US, they love me. They like my poetry. Even like the guy who has been sponsoring me from 2012 to date, he just loves my poetry. And he come to buy sculptures in Zimbabwe. So I was in the US in 2018. I'm very happy. I'm excited. Finally, I'm in the US. Then something extraordinary happens. I see Donald Trump going to Singapore, and there he shakes the hand of Supreme Leader Kim of North Carolina for the first time. And it's happening in my eyes, and I'm seeing it on CNN. And to me, it was like, wow, these things, it's something that has never happened. It's a wow. And from that, I was just inspired to write this poem, the famous handshake in Singapore, because I was really inspired. Like these people, they looked like so much of strangers to an extent that in their whole lifetime they'll never meet, but they have met. So it means there's a possibility that from all the wars that we're fighting in this world, there's a possibility that there can be peace. So I started to think about different ways that we relate to each other. There are some people we like, there are some people we don't like. How about we visit people we like? How about we visit people we don't like? How about we kind of like change ourselves, embrace some love and all sorts of things. So that's how I came up with that poem. And it also defines the beauty of art. I've noticed, especially with the emergence of social media, I'm an artist. If an idea just pops in my head right now, I can just put it on Twitter, on Facebook, or on WhatsApp. but it's an idea that is popped up. But sometimes it remains an idea. It's not even an ideology. It's not even a concept. It can be half baked. So art sometimes it grows like wine. It matures. I remember, I think it was 2019 when I was at Bridgewater. There was a lady who came. I think her name is Lorraine Kemp, if I'm not mistaken. She said amazing words to me in her workshop. She said, Taku, after I presented a beautiful poem, he said, well done. She said, Taku, you know what? The real magic starts when you start to revise your poetry. Then I said, wow. Because for me, I'm always writing and writing. I don't revise my poetry. I'm always writing and writing. So I started to revise my poetry and I started to see the magic. For example, this poem, I wrote it in 2018. Maybe I'm going to publish in 2022. It has matured. And it now makes sense now. Because now when I'm listening to it now, it was as if I was prophesying the coming of the COVID-19. Because in the poem, I was saying, go and give a person a handshake. Go and love a person. As if I'm saying, there shall come a time when it will be difficult to give a person a handshake. There shall come a time when it will be difficult to go and visit people. So, because the poem is matured now it's making a lot of sense. So that is the famous handshake in Singapore, and it's one of my best poems. And the other poems to look forward to on that album is another one called Hexagon Revelation. I wrote it when I was inspired by just looking at the flag of Israel. Then there's another one called Modern Hidden Time. I wrote it by the culture of Africans that we are always late. We are not on time. Then there's another one that is the forest in my plate. The forest in my plate is about animals that are complaining for animal rights, and it goes on like that. So it's a very beautiful album that is coming very soon.
Thank you. Do you have another poem for us?
Yes. So my last poem for today is called "We Love You, Mozambique." There was something that was happening in Mozambique, and some people, I think it's the jihad or ISIS, that were doing not nice things in Mozambique, and I wrote this poem not with that in mind, but when I finished writing this poem, I realized that my subconscious mind was thinking about that. So I'm going to perform that poem right now. My poem for today is entitled "We Love You, Mozambique." Enjoy. Someone in this world really wanted us to be separated. For what reasons? I don't know. But his plan really worked. We are so separated as if we are not the same. Same people, these are people. Same person, this is a person. But now acting all strangers with survival of the fittest instincts. I will destroy you before you destroy me. Has become our fun made united mantra. The enemy of the man is a man. Why can't we be men enough and love one another? We are lacking love in this world. Love deficiency is causing all these confusions and problems we are facing every day. If we can love each other, then who will love us? Animals don't love us because we abuse them every day. Plants don't love us because we are harassing them and burning them every day. Who will love us if we don't love ourselves? What value is money if we can't buy away all the scarcity of this world? And we enjoy being happy. What are we celebrating? Are we normal or abnormal? Are we normal or abnormal? What is normal? What is abnormal? Who are we? And what do we really want for ourselves? The best I can say is God have mercy on us. You created us for a purpose, as we did not. Create ourselves for no purpose. Thank you.
Thank you, Chikepe. I knew that when I asked you to be on a panel about presentation, that you would not disappoint. And I go back to that word embody. The poem is not just coming through your mouth; it's coming through your eyes, it's coming through your shoulders, it's coming through your knees. Every part of you takes on the poem as you present it, and that phenomenon, I think, is unusual in most poets. For most poets, I think that poetry comes from the head.
Yeah.
And I see your work coming not just from the head, but from all of you. And so thank you for that. I want to remind. Oh, you're very welcome. I want to remind people that now is the time to send in questions. So get your questions ready and send them in via the Q&A box on our website. And we'll look at those here in a few minutes. I want to go back to something that that you also did from the very beginning. You have woven together song, music with the poetry, and that's not to say that poetry isn't musical even without notes, because many poems do kind of sing themselves. But I think that there's that weaving together of the actual singing, like you did at the beginning of independent Zimbabwe, is something that is very appealing, particularly in today's audiences that are very media oriented, where your poem is presented on multiple layers, not in terms of thought, but in terms of presentation. And I wonder if any of if Taku might respond to that, or any of the others might talk about the way that music has found its way into the things that they write and or perform.
Okay, so maybe I can say something. So the way that I understand it is well, as poets sometimes maybe we look for different words that we can say to express a feeling and to express an emotion. But those words sometimes they might not be enough to express that feeling or to express that emotion. To an extent, you can write a very beautiful poem with very beautiful words, but you can fail to dress out the feeling or the emotion that inspired you to write those words. So for me, I always come back to the feeling and try to really understand what is it that caused me to write these beautiful words. So I capture that feeling and I compose music out of it. Because even like the way that people dance, they dance to the feeling whether the feeling comes from the beat of the music or from the vocals of the music. So from my side, it's an element of capturing the feeling and the emotion that inspired you to then dress up the words.
Yeah, and I just want to say I loved what you read and your work, Taku, and it's just very compelling, you know. And I think right now there's so much competing for our attention that, you know, how do you get it across, and how do you share it in a way that's really engaging and compelling and connects with those who are watching and listening. So that was really, really great to see. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you so much, Cynthia.
I just wanted to add one thing. I would love to see that when you go to grad school in the U.S., how your poetry changes with your experiences studying abroad. And I think that would be something very unique, or like something very interesting for me to see. Because right now, you know, it's so based on your country and how you speak to your people. I wonder, once you come to the U.S., how your poetry will change and how you would communicate with the U.S. audience as well as the people back home, and like what type of fusion you would come up with. So I'm excited about that. I think it was really good.
Yeah, I'm excited about that too.
Right.
Well, and I find it not coincidental that you're coming to the School of Divinity, because there is a certain kind of what I would call revival meeting quality to the delivery of what you give us. You know, for me, it's that declamation. You're not trying to entice or cajole a reader. You are there to declaim exactly what it is that is the truth that you're speaking at the moment.
Yeah, that's very true. I still remember the first time, I think it was 2012, when I did another poem that won into the top 10. It was called God My Father. And I was hesitant to perform that poem, but I performed it to a lady, I think her name is Marty Queensberry. And she really loved that poem. And to some extent, I think she's the one who inspired in a way for me to go to divinity. And she just said, Taku, you know, your poem is very spiritual. If you thought of divinity, you know, like I'm thinking of grad school, I'll think about that. But it just meshed everything. So I can relate.
Well, and I appreciate you giving credit to a number of other people along the way, because no poet, you know, to go back to Paul Simon, none of us are an island. And so we have to recognize that we grow through interactions like the ones we're having today. We grow through the back and forth, through the community of poets, and for each one of it is a different community, even when they overlap. And I'm so glad to have each of you as part of the community that we're building personally, as well as at now Pier-Glass panels for us. I have not seen whether we've gotten any questions in. Do we have anything yet? Brittany says no questions yet. So we'll give another couple minutes and see what people might want to ask you about how that you are performing, or how you are conscious about your performing of poems, because I think that's something that most of us do unconsciously, and trying to push it into the foreground today in this panel helps us think about choices that we make in, as Cynthia pointed out, what kind of background do we have? How do we interact with the light? How do we modulate our voice? And as Anum has said, I let my mood be reflected in how I prepare. And it's absolutely right. You can't dress for every poem, because you have to, take a break between each one. But you can kind of set the mood. And I know that Taku has done that before, where he would perform a piece and then he would say, "Give me a moment," and he would change his shirt. before the next poem, because that shirt was part of the poem. So I wonder if any of you might want to just think about or talk about a moment where you were deliberate about the appearance or the presentation of the poem aside from the words of the poem.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that, as poets, we agonize over every word, right? Every sound. So why wouldn't we also give careful thought to how we're delivering it? Who is the audience and what can we communicate there in front of everybody? And I love what Anum does and just how she drives home, sort of shares it at a deeper level through her presentation and the clothing and the makeup. I just think it's really, really cool. And Taku, it's just very, very theatrical. It's almost like the spoken word poets, where you cannot look away. And the first poem that he performed, it almost sounded like Mussolini in the square. I mean, with that echo, and it was really intense. Just really adds a lot.
I feel like a lot about it all ties back to like the image that a person wants to create. Some of it might be very deliberate, like dressing up or like through performance, but really it just comes down to like everyone's personalities, and that works. Your personality works both on a subconscious and a conscious level. You just switch back and forth between the two, and your poetry is a reflection of you. So when you write, no matter where you write or what mediums you use, you're just bringing out your voice. And that voice creates the image. So the image can be anything. Does that make sense? Like, it doesn't need to be so deliberate. It's just you bringing yourself out into the world that creates that image, which is you. And people can put it into different boxes, thinking it's subconscious or conscious or deliberate, or you're using music or you're writing. But it's just you.
Yeah, no, I agree, Anum. I think that so much of this is unconscious for us, that it just derives from the individual impulses that we have, and but I think that we want to sometimes be deliberate. I think that Taku wouldn't go into a venue to perform a poem without thinking about where he's going to stand and how is he going to project his voice and so forth. So there's that interplay between what we plan purposefully and what we plan without thinking about it. And I think both of them come into play. And today I wanted to try to look at those purposeful moments that we have.
Yeah, so I mean, if we're reading a poem to an audience and we're not deliberate about our presentation, we're still making an impact. We're still, standing for something and coming across in a certain way. We just don't know what it is. I think so. It just, to me, why wouldn't you be really intentional about it? Because it's part of it, It's part of the delivery, whether you think about it or not. And if you don't, you're going to get whatever you send out,
Yeah, and you have, we all have different backgrounds, and I'm thinking about your work with television and how that some of your conscious decisions have become unconscious. You've just learned how to change your voice without thinking about why you need to change it at a certain point. For others of us, that's a new thing because we're reading as if it was a letter from our mother instead of the president shaking hands with some other dignitary. So being able to create purposeful image is an addition to what we have to give. It isn't the poem itself. It doesn't replace the poem, but it is the seasoning with which we're able to give it over to someone else.
Yeah, and also on the purposeful act, I would say the purposeful act, it also comes with the identity of the poet.
Mhm.
The identity of the poet also creates purposeful act. For example, when I was nominated in Jamaica, I had to really Google who Mutabaruka is from Jamaica. And when I was listening to some of his interviews, he was asked, why you don't wear shoes? Then he said, I don't wear anything that is made of leather because I don't eat meat. So when people, they're seeing him going to the stage without shoes, he's making a statement about his relationship between him and leather. So I think purposeful act, it comes from a way that we also want to portray our identity to the audience. And for myself, the other part of it which is not purposeful, poetry makes me think. Sometimes I don't even have an idea of what to do, but makes me think. For example, today when I was reading my poem, We Love You Mozambique, I didn't have an idea. I'm in my small office like this and I'm sitting on my sofa, but I don't have anything to do. But when I was reading it, I realized that I want solutions, but sometimes solutions we get them from books. So I take some of my books and be on top of my books. So it's a way of saying why are we failing to have solutions when we've got all these books that we have? Why are these books not giving us solutions? So I'm going to step on these books with my feet. It's a way of sending a statement somewhere. So it comes from the poem. The poem, for me, the poem sometimes is not me, but we have to have a communication with the poem until we produce some things.
That's very good. And your camera caught you standing with the books there for us to notice while you were there. And as I think Anum kind of alluded to, what we present, and it's up to the viewer, the listener, to decide what it means. How does it relate? What is the importance of this part? And you can either be explicit or you can be implicit. You can let it, and I think most poets tend to be implicit with the way that they deliver and perform. They let the text say what it says, but what people do with it, typically we don't tell people what to do with the text of the poem. That's part of that contract between the poet and the listener, is to negotiate meaning from it. And so by you simply standing on the books to say, I have a foundation in this, and letting the reader decide what that means, I think is a powerful way of getting that across.
I mean, I think it also has to do with just respecting your audience. Maybe, if you went to an important meeting or to, some gathering and you maybe take a little extra care, it shows, that you do care. And that you're being mindful of it because of that. And you're also being a little strategic, I guess, rather than just showing up and, as you said, Stan, letting everybody else decide what they want to make of it. You're taking a little more control, moving people in that direction, and then they can just listen to the words, and hopefully that comes through.
I mean, sorry. It doesn't all go back to how Takudzwa was saying that a poem matures over time. He wrote something in 2018, and then he's thinking of publishing it much later because it's the right time. It's COVID-19, so you can publish it. So in the same way, we as poets or we as people mature with the way we deliver our stuff to the audience over time, and a point comes where it becomes, I wouldn't say repetitive, but you just own your game, so you kind of know how to go with the flow, so it doesn't feel like you're putting in so much effort, unless it's something super important, you might things are dropping. Add in a little effort into it. Does that make any sense? It just flows as you grow.
Yes, yeah, I think that's exactly, Dr. Right, and I think that's what Cynthia was saying a moment ago about how that some decisions are conscious but become unconscious the more we do them, so that our work it's who we are that day. And as you say, the same poem, 2-3 years from now that we might deliver might look very different because we have embodied it, we have embraced it in a different way. So I think all of these insights are good for us. Okay, let me do one last check. Brittany, do we have something that we can respond to from the viewers?
Yeah, I've actually got a couple of questions I was going to try to condense and toss out. The first one that I wanted to throw out goes to all three panelists for today, so all or any of them can feel to comment. So this person had made a connection between the performance of poetry and theater, and so they wanted to know how you guys decide which poems lend themselves to performance, and with that, how you determine the pauses, pitch, and elongation of the words in your poetry.
I'm not sure I caught the last part of that question, Brittany, but in terms of the first part, I was having a conversation the other day with one of my poetry friends, and we were talking about how do we decide which poems to read. And that's a great way, I think, to determine which poems you're most passionate about, which ones you're happiest with, and choosing those to share and delivering those. But I'd love to know the second part of that question. I'm not sure if it was my end, so that was just hard to hear.
Oh, that's okay. The second part was how you determine the pauses or the pitch or the elongation with certain words in the poems that you perform.
I mean, certainly line breaks, right? Line breaks to me are about breath and what words you choose to emphasize. I think that's really clear for me, more so when I'm writing the poem and then when I'm delivering it and reading it. Hopefully, the same areas I tried to emphasize when it was written on the page. It's such a different experience, right? Reading those poems where all the breaks are versus actually, seeing it on page versus sharing it. So it's really interesting because it really is a different experience. And I know poets have different philosophies. Like some say, you never want to pause really definitively at the end of the line break. For me, it depends on what works in the context of the line. So I don't think there's a hard and fast rule, but it's interesting to think about.
A good point would also be like where you naturally pause, like the way it's like talking, you take a breath and then you stop and you talk again, and the conversation flows smoothly. So when you read a poem and you're just focusing on the poem on the page, just see where you stop naturally and just stop there and then continue reading again. I think that's very important rather than focusing on, the little itty bitty things there. I think for me personally, I would just naturally stop where I feel like I would like to stop, take a breath and start again and then continue reading.
Yeah, and from my side, I would say the best thing that I really enjoy when it comes to presenting poetry is to present the latest poem that I have. I enjoy presenting the latest, like the We Love You Mozambique is my latest poem. So every time when I'm called anyway, even so, remember that the time when I came to Bridgewater, I came without poetry, but I came without a poem to read. The poem I read it in my dormitory. Why do I do that? It's because the same energy that is inspired me to write the poem, it will still be very big in me. So it creates a unique emotion that I would think in a way can be very different. That's how I choose my poetry. Unless otherwise, when I fail to connect, but sometimes it's different not to fail to connect. One is that you have to connect. Then when it comes to the pronunciations and the pitch and the voice, to me, I'm helped by two things. The first thing is sometimes the way that I write my poetry. I write my poetry in a flowing way, like it has got pattern. It has got patterns. Sometimes it's zigzag, it goes straight. It's not like a one big sentence and a small sentence. A one big sentence, it flows. So when I read my poem, when I read my poetry, my voice also then flows according to the pattern that I've written the poem in. People, they don't know, they just think the poem looks nice on the paper, but along the years, when you start to read the poem, it doesn't only look nice on the paper, it also, you can hear it nice. That's one way. Then the second part is that one that I mentioned, that I started knowing how to read at a later stage. So I don't take words for granted. I read every word, every comma for comma, every T for T, every dot for. So where I put a comma, I have to respect the comma. Where I put an exclamation mark, I have to do that. So it guides also with the I didn't mention, but that's the third part. When we read, like the simple thing, I see some poets they do that, and I also do that. It really helps me. For example, like if Dr. Stan and our next poet is Taco, then I go to the stage. When I go to the stage, I don't just go to stage and say, "Thank you so much," and my poem is like this and this. I go to the stage, and I am there quiet. That is very important, because when you are there quiet, now you are trying to synchronize with the energy that is inside the room. So you can feel the energy inside the room, and when you breathing out the words, you are trying to harness with the energy that is inside the room. It also helps you to know when to pitch your voice and when to do something else.
Yeah, that's great, Taco. To give that specific example about kind of resetting yourself before you begin the poem. I'm reminded of something that I learned from reading Denise Levertov. I never met her. I wish that I had, but I've learned so much from her poetry. And she talks about she writes in the unit of breath. That unit of breath is, how many words, how many ideas can I get across before I need to physically breathe again? That's how long a line is. And so I think about that. And some poems, you start to hyperventilate. You have very short lines because you want to, it's almost like stabbing an ice block with an ice pick. You do it very fast and quickly over and over. Other poems you need to linger on. You think of Walt Whitman, where you've got very long lines, almost longer than you can say without breathing, because these are things that they're complex ideas that you have to hold together. So that's one way to think about where do the pauses come. Well, think about your breathing. Let it be as synchronized with the way that you breathe. Okay, Brittany, you have a follow-up to that?
Yes, I do. This one is another one that goes out to all the panelists. It says, how do you separate yourself as the poet from the speaker in your poem as you write and present it?
I wouldn't do that. For me, I feel like I would never separate myself as a poet from the speaker I am or the poem in itself, because they're both, if I'm getting it right, they're both the same identity. And I think a lot of kids, they stress on that a lot. They feel like they're somebody else, but when they're writing, they need to be somebody else. It's not. You need to grow comfortable with your voice so that what you write is your voice and how you are and how you live and interact with other people in your daily lives. So I would not create that distinction, but that's just me.
I feel like I caused that question because we had an assignment earlier where their assignment was to write someone else's story in a poem. And so I think that's where it's coming from. But I agree with you. Don't try to create an artificial voice that is like your poet voice that you're reacting with. but learn how. I mean, we all have different voices in us. I speak differently to my father than I do to my son. Because I am a different person in a sense in that regard, and so learning how to channel the appropriate voice for the poem that's being written. It's still your voice, but it may come out differently. Uh, you know, unless you're right. I'm just thinking, unless you're writing, like Robert Browning in My Last Duchess, he is not the speaker of the poem, even though the Duke of Ferrara is in that poem. There, you adopt a different voice, but Browning had such a command of character uh, that he was able to do that. He could speak in the voice of so many different people as well, and maybe that kind of feeds back to the question about theater. Maybe sometimes a poem is, your Pirates of Penzance poem because you're just having fun about crazy ideas on stage. So that separation between the writer and the speaker, in the confessional mode, certainly there is no distance at all between those. I think it just depends on the poem as to how far you get from your natural day-to-day voice.
Yeah, like sorry, it just hits me so hard when people talk about that. No, but like for example, if I wrote a poem once about a flower, like in the voice of a flower that was about to be, it was a dandelion. So dandelion, it looks pretty, but it's a weed. Nobody really likes it, so it's kind of like chopped down. But yet, because they're so pesky and they're like little weeds, they'll grow up and grow out of the ground again. So I kind of like, it's kind of like me being the speaker, like speaking in the voice of something that can't speak, like a flower. But yet at the same time, I preserve my original voice because my feelings and emotions are being conveyed through a different medium, which is the flower. Does that make sense? I just want to say that don't lose your authentic voice. Your voice may go into different forms and shapes and like different characters, but who you are, you need to make sure that's there, is what I'm trying to say.
Great point. Gosh, so important. I love that. I mean, I guess that's, part of it. And it's hard for me with the TV background training is, how do you let go of the subject matter and just be real and be authentic? It's hard. And to be vulnerable, because to me, that's what poetry is. Whether they're your words or, you're reading someone else's poem.
Right. Otherwise, they would just like kill you, like in the undergrad program or MFA programs. They'll just like try to stab your voice down if you're not confident. You just wouldn't be able to survive it. You need to bring yourself out. That is so important. That's like the first thing you need to do. So yeah, sorry, this is like I needed to say
it. Yeah, from my side, I think this is a. No wonder why this question came also from Dr. Stan Galloway. I think it's a very strong question. Maybe I'll use that. It's a very strong question. Because I think it also mean a lot. But from my side, I would say, for me, I was a person before I became a poet. So I'm a person now when I'm not performing poetry. So the way that I appreciate my poetry now, I appreciate my poetry as a student of learning something that is very new. For example, today I've performed this poem, but I don't know what I'm going to write tomorrow, and why I'm going to write the poem that I'm going to write tomorrow. And even if I don't write anything tomorrow, I still remain me, just being me. So when poetry happens, it just happens, and I can just be a student. It's I think that's why for me it's easy for me to say it's a state of mind or a powerful state of mind because we remain us. I'll give an example of that guy I once mentioned, the guy from Zimbabwe, the name Takudzwa Chikepe, the one who passed away in 1987. He was extremely intelligent, Yet, being extremely intelligent, I don't know if his gift caused him to be an alcoholic. I don't know, but when he was drunk in a pub, he is now drunk. Now he can be on top of the tables, and he starts to do poetry on top of the tables, and he is cursing people and doing all sorts of other things in very beautiful English language. And sometimes you'll be beaten out of the pub, and yet he was performing poetry. So sometimes I don't know if we can separate ourselves, or sometimes if we can if we can sugarcoat ourselves, or if we can be normal in our abnormality, or if we can be abnormal in our normality. I don't know, somewhere along those lines. But from my side, going to school, going to university, it really helped me.
Sorry, you hit your mute button, Taku.
Oh, sorry. So I was saying, so from in my case, I could have been an extremist like Dambudzo Marichera, with the way that I write poetry, and I would say this frankly, and then there was a time when I used to smoke a lot of weed, but then I realized that what I'm writing is not coming from the weed. So if I keep on smoking weed and yet I've got a gift of writing, I'll end up exploding or doing other things. So I need to stop like smoking weed and maybe amplify my level of reading so that I don't have a conflict with these two big institutions. So I managed to stop the weed smoking institution, and I embraced the book reading and university institution as a way of harnessing that energy with my poetry energy. And later I harness that energy with also the divinity part of it, and it's going on well. If it's not like that, sometimes, not to all, but sometimes for us poets, from the way that I understand it, sometimes if we don't take care of ourselves, I'm very happy that we are broadcasting this with the students that are at the university. If we were broadcasting this with the students that are in the streets, you would hear a lot of things. So if we don't take care of ourselves in a way, we might end up even having multiple personalities, losing ourselves. You end up not knowing the poetry the you that was there before the poetry, and the list goes on.
These are some excellent insights that you've all shared with us. Does that summarize, Brittany, the questions that have come in?
There was one more that I saved just in case we had time to get to it. This one was for Taku. I had to kind of guess on the context, but I would probably put it in both a personal context and when attempting to write about it. The question was, what advice would you have for Americanized Africans who have lost touch with their roots and aren't in tune with their homeland?
Okay. Sometimes the best gift that we can give ourselves, especially for someone who is there, is travel. Travel is really amazing. It's very rich. They need to come here. They need to visit Zimbabwe. They need to visit African countries as a way of understanding some things. Because I think Cynthia agrees with me of some things that are broadcasted in the television. Some of the things is what is broadcasted is what is supposed to be broadcasted, but you need to broadcast your own everything that you want for your own purposes. So it's very rich to come to Africa and see so many things. Like you'll be really inspired. You add on to everything that you have. I saw a quotation. I really liked it recently. It was saying, I have got nothing, so I embrace everything. I think I can relate that to me because for me, I am in Africa. So when I leave Africa, when I'm invited in the US, like for the first time, I know I don't have anything, when I come for a festival like Bridgewater or another festival, the first instinct that comes into my mind is I have to appreciate everything. So when everyone is performing, I'm listening so much. I have to make sure that I learn everything that I can, so as to add to what I have, and it really works well for me. So I encourage them to do that, so they can search themselves and get to understand themselves more.
I think that's a beautiful response, Taku. We learn so much about ourselves, regardless of our background, when we travel and we see other cultures, when we see even other places within our own culture that we're not in everyday contact with. Just that understanding beyond the environment that was home for us. For some of us, that's a home that we will embrace and hang on to all our lives. For others of us, that might be a home that we want to get away from, at the earliest opportunity. And I don't ever judge about where a person has come from. What matters to me is who is that person today, and what are they striving for. And I think that travel helps you understand yourself in a way that nothing else does.
I can give an example of something that really happened. I haven't shared it. The first time I came to the States, of course, it was through Bridgewater. I had beautiful poetry, according to myself. But when I listened to people reading their poetry, I learned a lot. The question that I asked myself is, why do I shout when I'm reading my poetry? Why can't I just read my poetry? So from that period, I learned to tone down, so that I didn't know that I shout. But then I realized that I can read poetry without shouting. So it's something new that I learned, and I developed a new skill. There's some poems that right now I can just read, and they can get into a realm. I would quote someone that I really like, who has got a different pitch of voice than mine, but his poetry is really good. He's Hiram Laro. He is soft in his poetry, and he's just speaking in his poetry, but you can just get into the zone and enjoy the poetry. So I learned that when I came to the US.
Well, so good of you to, again, pass on the accolades to other people. Hiram, who you mentioned, will be a panelist in our panel on food in poetry. So watch for that. And we'll use this time to wrap up and say thank you to Anum and to Cynthia and to Takudzwa Chikepe for being here with us today and talking about vulnerability and presentation and identity, all of these things that get wrapped up into what it means to be a poet. We hope you'll join us in other of our Pier-Glass poetry panels, and we'll sign up for today. Thank you for being here.